Hello, welcome back to Lit Open Podcast. I'm your host, Charna Cassell, somatic therapist, sex educator, and a guide through the tender terrain of healing and intimacy and regaining vitality after trauma. This is part 1 of 2 with Ariella Daley. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to offer a gentle trigger warning. In this episode, Ariella shares her experience as a survivor of sexual assault and how it's woven into her connection to the unseen, to ritual, and her body. We talk about how trauma lives in the nervous system, how healing can unfold through connection with nature and the dream world, and what it means to reclaim one's voice, sensuality, and sense of safety. This is a powerful, moving, and intimate conversation. I'm honored to share it with you. Please take care of yourselves as you listen. Pause when you need to, and know that you're not alone. There are also going to be resources listed in the show notes. Do you ever meet people that you wish you had met on a playground or in a field of flowers, on a trail as a 5-year-old, and you feel like you could immediately enter a whole other world with them and play and just be fast friends? Well, I feel that way about this guest, and she is so wise, knows so much about mythology and animism and beekeeping and dream work that she feels kind of otherworldly and magical to me. Today's guest is Ariella Daley. She's a dream worker, animist, and beekeeper with over 15 years of experience tending hives and teaching others how to approach bees, nature, and their own lives through intuition, animism, and ecological care. Welcome, Ariella.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, thank you, Charna. I'm really happy to be here as well.
So I found you through Instagram, and there are those moments. There's a lot to not like about social media, but the moments like this of like discovering somebody that I resonate with, and I'm like, ooh, I want to have tea with this person. I feel very grateful. So to give a little more context to the listeners, you're a beekeeper, and you also are a dream guide. You would probably frame it in different language, but how do the two things connect for you?
Always asking that question. Yep. So I could say I could start with these two streams of influence that came from my parents. And my mother was you could say like a naturalist, still
Mhm.
is. My father is a mystic, and my father brought in storytelling and bardic energy and Celtic lineage and dream work. The Celts were avid dreamers, still are. So I was introduced to this idea of dreaming as just part of who you are, and not only that, but intuitive dreaming and psychic dreaming because
Mhm.
God, it's we often think of the intuition as we associate it with the feminine or as a result with women, but really the intuitive thread that I inherited came down my father's line
Mhm.
through him. So I was starting to have intuitive dreams at a young age, and also it was mirrored to me as a normal thing. And then I had this deep reverence for the earth, this
Mm.
passionate love affair that even like my teachers joked about. I was the kid who could not focus on the lesson if there was snow falling outside because what else mattered besides the beauty?
Mm.
Oh, I was the kid who was like, "Oh, I got another deer," and my friends would be like, "Yes, they're here every day," and I was like, so, So I had this like reverence for nature that sort of came together in 2011. I had spent years studying women's traditions in ancestral cultures, which spread from the Celtic cultures into ancient Greece and the ancient world in general. And we're talking about Europe, not there's lots of other ancient worlds, but so Europe and some North Africa, Scandinavia, different parts of the ancient world, specifically women's spirituality. And I came across women's spirituality connected to bees. And I went to go learn more about that. I wanted to understand it more. And while I was taking a workshop trying to understand who are these bee women connected to bees in ancient Greece, wild bees moved into a wall in my house. And that wall happened to share my bedroom. So they were coming in and out of the cavity between the walls. They weren't in my room, but they were in the wall behind my bed. And I started dreaming literally with bees in the wall. And I had no idea. All of my dream work hadn't prepared me for what it was like to share dreaming with a non-human organism. I even had the idea of perhaps like spirits and being sent dreams from spirits, but I hadn't experienced dreaming with a
Mm.
being. And it radicalized my whole worldview. I had understood that there was a thing called animism and these indigenous worldviews, but it was very different to experience it and to experience being held in a way in my dreaming by the bees, particularly through a subsequent trauma, which was a like surgical hospitalized miscarriage that I went.
Mm.
So I was healing that while having these wild bees in the wall. And then about a week after that, I caught my first swarm, which is how bees biologically reproduce as a whole, as a
Mm.
single organism. And swarms are very much associated in the ancient past with the feminine and this and rebirth, giving birth to oneself. So I caught this swarm while I was grieving the loss of pregnancy, and they got me back from what I would call a very loose hold on reality. Not reality, but on life. Very heather. They just anchored me right back down into my body. And I learned very quickly working with bees the incredible power they have to heal
Mm.
us as we are in service to them, which is a mutual exchange. And that's pretty phenomenal. So dreaming came through that. I would literally dream of them, but also the sense of being held by them in my dreams. It's hard.
Mm. No, it's so beautiful and so profound. And first of all, I love the image of the bees living with the bees and them being there and then just imagining the sound and the vibration in the room and imagining like that the room is a womb. And
Yes.
I know that you were healing your own womb, and that there's so much we know now, like humming and vibration impacts our vagus nerve and can calm the nervous system, and the the wisdom of the bees offering that to you during that very vital time. And also thinking about one of the things I like to think about is waking dreams.
Yes.
Right? So here we are, whether I'm sitting with a client or my own experience, that sometimes we have these wild experiences in waking life. And it's like, if this was a dream, how would I be with it? Like do soul work with it in a particular way.
Beautiful framing. I love that.
And I'm imagining, given it was such a potent period that you were existing in when this happened, that you've worked a lot with that. And have you looked at it as a waking dream in that way?
I think the answer is probably yes, although perhaps not using the same language, but I believe that we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
I work with what I might call cultivating the numinous or liminal states of being. And so there's this, in my dream classes, for instance, I teach intentional dreaming first and
Mhm.
foremost. So intentional dreaming or dream incubation is this idea that you aren't just waiting for your subconscious to send you a dream, you are calling in dreams, you are writing down intentions. And those can start with things as simple as, I want clarity about, whether or not I should take this job, something like that, but can go into areas of deeper spiritual inquiry, or, and this is what I really love to do, the invitation of the more than human world. So to invite in what it is to dream with the bees, or to invite in dreaming on a particular piece of land. Like if you're traveling, to approach it as a pilgrimage. And what is it to dream with, the river that you're near, or the ancestors, your grandmother's heritage, whatever it might be, as if your dreams can be co-created. So it's not that you're taking your agency out of it, but you're co-creating this reality. And so what I find is that when we engage intentionally with the dream weave, the weave of life on earth as it's dreamt, as a place of mutability where anything and everything is possible, we influence our waking lives. And a lot of the times in today's modern psychology, we think of our daily lives influencing our dreams, which is of course true. We do dream about things that we've seen or experienced throughout the day or throughout the week or month. But what if it's also the other way around, that we can dream healing into being? We can dream ourselves whole. We can dream with the earth, for instance, towards a wholeness or towards a healing. So then what happens in those in-between moments when you're falling asleep, in those moments when you're perhaps having deja vu or listening to really good music and go into that other place? It's all, to me, this similar threshold location where the fixed reality that we're in sort of releases its hold, and connections are possible, new pathways are possible. I think this is in a way where we start to reprogram our brain and our thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so. The waking dream, for me, waking often mirrors the dreams, and it's really interesting to follow along.
I love all of that. It's endlessly interesting. And just so that listeners have a context, can you describe animism and inanimate earth and kind of an animist worldview?
Yeah, all my big words.
Excellent concepts, and so that we're on the same ride.
I am, God, I'm such a big nerd. I love words. I love language. So, animism can be kind of a scary word unless you apply it to modern context. And so what we mean by that is, in some ways, we're stepping a little bit away from overuse of the term shaman and shamanic, because that's been applied as an anthropological term, but it really belonged to the Tungus people, to the people who actually named themselves shamans. So animist is this idea, or animism is this idea, that the earth is alive, which is shared with shamanic cultures around the world, but that the earth is alive, that life pulses through everything, even inanimate objects. And when we look at the world through this framing, which if you reach far enough back in your ancestry, is there in your blood somewhere. Everyone has this because it was the baseline for many different cultures throughout time. The mountain isn't named after a white man. The mountain is named after, it's not even named after, it is. It's a presence, it's a being. And animism, from a modern lens, is saying we can rethread that connection through many ways and many modalities, but suddenly I don't just have a rosemary bush outside. I have a particular rosemary bush outside, and I could potentially have a conversation with that rosemary bush. And that rosemary bush might also connect me to the consciousness of rosemary as a whole, or perhaps the flowering of the earth as a whole. And now I'm having these layered experiences of sentience. Similarly, the body can contain sentience that doesn't, yes, I am a whole, and yes, my blood runs through my whole body, but what is it to dream with the consciousness and the sentience of my womb, or my heart, or my bones? What might they want to tell me? So animism in this sense is even applied to ideas that don't have physical experience, like the spirit of a group, the spirit of a business, and we can connect with the consciousness, the life force of everything.
Right. Right. And the consciousness, it's like whether it's something that's pre-existing or it's something that you're birthing into being. When I,
Precisely.
yeah, yeah, beautiful. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just trying to say, did I answer your questions about, did there any words you threw out there? So the
Yeah,
animist
yeah,
group is the consciousness of the earth, that sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah. And how that, you answered this, but how it influences an orientation to life and a particular path that you walk.
I would say something to that. And it's a comment on our society at large right now, especially post-pandemic in the current experience of technology. We know technology can connect us, it can weave us. It's comes from techne, it comes from to weave and to speak and text and all of these ways that we communicate. And yet we've never felt more isolated. We have this cultural discussion, the societal discussion around our disconnect from nature, our disconnect from communities, our disconnect from our bodies, our disconnect.
Mm.
And so we're looking for how do we reweave ourselves? How do we reconnect? And the worldview shift into everything has life force and presence, and that I might be able to have a conversation through my feeling body, through my imagination, through my intuitive body, even through my physical body with a mountain is revolutionary, but it also makes me suddenly feel less alone. And that is what the bees did for me, especially when I was grieving the loss of a pregnancy. I was no longer alone. I was cared for while caring for. And that stewardship, that kinship is, I think, is kind of the part of the root of why we're here, to
Yeah.
be in love and be in relationship.
Absolutely. That's so sweet. I had a teacher, a significant teacher in my 20s who was a mystic from Ghana,
Mm.
brother Ishmael Tete, and he practiced earth-based spirituality. Do you know him? I see your
No,
head
I'm
lighting
just
up. Oh, okay.
I'm loving this description. Yeah.
Yeah, oh God, he was so amazing. I feel like I don't know how tall, like 6'7". He's a huge man, and he would give these amazing hugs. But he would, you could just drink a sip of tea and feel an element, like feel the wind in your mouth. Like everything could be a ritual and everything could be a moment of being present with him. So he introduced me to this practice. It's like this reciprocity practice.
Yeah.
So I would walk down the street, and if it was raining, I would be in a conversation with the rain. I would even be in conversation with, like you're saying, inanimate objects like a lamppost. Literally, I was just constantly in this practice of asking things, whether it was a tree or whether it was an inanimate object, like, what do you need from me? And what do you have for me? And being in that dialogue and just listening for what arose. And so one of the things I'm curious about for you is your work with the bees and with dreaming and how that has enhanced your intuition and how you also use that to help people connect more deeply with theirs.
Absolutely. Hmm. Your story reminds me of a mentor I had briefly in high school. I was studying herbalism for a project, and she was very gruff. I was really intimidated by her. She was probably in her early 70s at the time, and she didn't have me do anything in the garden but weed. And
Mm.
what she teaching me, she taught me, she like watched me for the first day. And then the second day, she said, okay, now I want you to ask the plants that you're weeding to please release.
Mm.
And it was just a totally different experience. And I still come back to it. I'll be weeding and I'll get into my head, or I'll be thinking about something else and it'll be really tough. And then I'll just stop and I'll ask the plant to let go. And it will let go. And it's immediate. It's
Mhm.
phenomenal. So,
Mhm.
yeah, this act of reciprocity, you know, bees, why bees is always my question. It could have been something else, could have been another element of nature, but it happened to be bees that really called me in. I don't think I found them. I think they found me.
Mhm.
And they have a way, because they are a collective, that really gives you that sense of inclusivity, gives you that sense of collective well-being, and gives you a sense of that you're part of a greater whole when you're with them. I mean, literally, when you're in a beehive, if you're opening a honeybee hive, we're talking about the honeybee Apis mellifera in this case, but could apply to other species of honeybees. You are going into their body, which is, according to science, actually more akin to a mammalian womb than any other insect. It has to be the right temperature to keep. What you're going into is where the brood is, and the brood of the babies. So when you're opening a hive, it's primarily brood. It's surrounded by honey, which is carbohydrates, nutrition, and it gives them energy, and pollen, which is protein. But mainly it's this womb heart of the hive, where all the young in the first few days of life are fed mother's milk. They're fed royal jelly, this milky white substance. My friend Sylvia Lindstedt is a beautiful author, and she calls it hive milk. And I just love that image. So this is a very tender thing to do, to open the body of a being. And yet they envelop you. So you're standing in this space with bees flying all around you. Generally, if you're gentle, you're not getting stung. It depends, of course, the subspecies and whatnot. But generally, if you're listening, if you're in your body, if you're embodied, if you are not having a rant in your head or replaying a conversation you had, they require ultimate presence. They are meditation. There's a reason bees have been used for, beekeeping has been used for people dealing with PTSD. They've been worked with in prison programs in places like Chicago in the UK to help people drop into presence. And it's this presence that is so fine-tuned. It's so cute because you are being affected by the hum and the vibration of the hive. You are listening. The shift in tone will tell you how they're doing, and it'll tell your body or your mind clicks over, because you are an animal. So your animal is listening to this hive full of pretty much like, 50, 60,000 at times singing sisters. They can sting. They're mostly singing, but they can sing. And there's a humbleness there. There's a reverence. So this is happening. You have to be with your feet on the ground. You have to pay attention to your movements. You have to slow down. So quite physically, you are shifting into a state of presence. And when you reach that place, when you get into that Zen, it is so interesting to watch. I see it with students all the time when I bring people to the hives for the first time. Afterwards, it's like they've just taken a drug. They're like, I don't know. I can't, like, I don't even know if I can drive right now. I feel really strange. And it's, if you stay open to that feeling, it's the same feeling of coming out of a very, very vivid dream where you're like, I don't know whether or not I'm back in my full reality yet. I feel the dream with me. There's something that's happening. You're being like, if I were to put a name on it, it's almost like you're being attuned by the bees. It's not really the other way around, no matter how much we manipulate the hives. It's the bees inviting us or holding us in their presence. So that alone for me is this baseline shift out of the thinking mind. Of course, you can stay in your thinking mind and analyze what's going on the whole time, but this opportunity to come out of the thinking mind into the intuitive body. And that alone opens us up to greater intuitive connection. In my work, I then teach how to actually hear the bees and listen to the bees and work with them from this deeper listening place. And people always think of I got this message that said this, 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 and this. And that's not necessarily what hearing or listening means. It means, what does your body say? What's happening in your body? What's happening to your emotions? What are those knowings that you're getting that you couldn't put names to? Is there a sort of pervasive sense of a color around you as you close your eyes and feel into being next to the bees? And the same applies to how we approach dreaming. It's, again, these altered states. So where do bees and dreams connect for me? It's going into altered states of being where our logic and intellect gets to take a back seat so that the numinous, other benevolent spirits, the consciousness of the bees, for example, can reach us, because our modern life doesn't allow for that. So by creating space for dreaming, we're also opening up to that intuitive self that can be touched by the gods, so to speak, as the ancient Greeks used to do. They used to incubate their dreams in healing temples to receive spontaneous, miraculous physical healing.
Amazing. Yeah, Asclepion, is that the place?
Yeah, Asclepion.
Was something that I read about, probably 20 years ago, and I've always wanted to go and visit those sites
Yes, they
and
were all
lay there.
over.
And right, like you'd outdoor amphitheaters where you'd lay and dream.
Yes, yes and no. So Asclepions were dedicated to the god Asclepius, who's still the modern symbol for his symbol is still the modern symbol for medicine. He was considered the father of modern medicine. So the staff with the serpent winding around it, right? The serpent and the bee are very, very old symbols connected to the goddess, actually, and connected to feminine or female regeneration. Bees would swarm, give birth to themselves every spring. Snakes would shed their skin and renew themselves. And in the pre-patriarchal religions, this was often seen as a symbol of the earth itself, the goddess, Gaia, all the different names for her regenerating herself. Of course, this eventually shifted into a more patriarchal male dominant view. And Asclepius, there's nothing wrong with him. I'm just giving a sense of history.
Yeah.
He became the god of healing and dreams. Mesopotamia, long before him, there was a goddess of healing and dreams connected to serpents and dogs. In ancient Egypt, there is a god of healing and dreams. They came together, these two things. Bridget is a god of Irish goddess, healing and dreams. So these two things come together, and it says a lot about, again, another worldview where one might experience healing through the dream world first, or the dream world might inform us of the healings needed. In ancient Greece, they kind of perfected the art of these dream healing temples where people, I'm just smiling because I know what I'm going to say, but people would go to these, they'd go on pilgrimage. It would be a big thing. There would be ritual offerings. There would be fasting, bathing, and then you'd go into these dormitories. So it actually was enclosed, these enclosed dormitories. In fact, the bee priestesses at Eleusis doing the Eleusinian mysteries with Demeter and Kore, Persephone, they also had dream incubation. So this would happen. And then during that time, one would be visited by the god or a god. The other thing that was going on is that in the Asclepions, the ones dedicated to Asclepius, they would release non-venomous snakes. And the snakes would wander through and over and around the sleeping people. If one was touched by a snake or licked by a snake or dreamt of a snake, it was considered a transmission, a direct healing from the god.
I have a story I have to share with you.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, my senior year, I was lucky enough to have a program at my school from 7th grade onward called Mysteries. And yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, and the senior year,
So jealous.
I know. Well, I'm like, you had a mystic father? That's amazing.
Okay, fair enough.
So we went to Ojai and we worked on the land and we spent a week there and we got to do a sweat lodge and then there was a follow-up after graduation. They did a follow-up vision quest and it was like a 1-day thing, but we would go and we had to pick a piece of land that we wanted to spend 24 hours alone on. And in a hypnagogic state the night before we had to go out and pick a spot, I saw my spot. And I was so excited. And the next day I was like looking and looking. I'm like, this is I finally found the spot. And I was the last person to like pick my spot. And I was standing on this big rock and I had one of the elders who is a guide on the trip standing behind me. And I was like, this is the spot. And he was like, don't move. Apparently, there was a huge grandfather rattlesnake, had a really big rattle that was right underneath the rock I was standing on. And he basically said, without saying too much, he said, "You have to pick a different spot. You can't pick this spot." What he had seen, which I didn't know at the time, was he just saw all the holes. Like, he was like, "It was a rattlesnake den." And so told him, "Okay," and I, like, picked another spot, but I didn't. I went back to that spot. And that was the place that I slept with. And so I'm just, like, picturing, I didn't have any kind of follow-up experience with the snake.
You didn't see the snakes?
I didn't see the snakes. I heard, like, just in that one experience, but I didn't but the idea, I'm just, like, picturing that I have wanted to have this experience in one of these temples for all these decades, and I'm like, "Oh, maybe I had my own version," and it was a profound thing to have that image and then find the spot for me, and, yeah, that teacher later when I admitted that I'd gone back to the same spot, it's like every 10 years, I'll see him, and that's the story he likes to tell.
Yeah. That that is potent. There's a big difference between venomous and non-venomous snakes. And yet, I mean, I get it. Rattlesnakes are why I'm in the job I'm in.
Ooh, say more about that.
Oh, it gets a little dark, but yes, I will.
Okay.
I love that story. I love that it was a grandfather snake. I love that. So in my mind, a vision like that's the land calling you. It might even have been
Mhm.
the snakes calling you, just saying
Mhm.
like that is an initiation. To go back there, to say yes and go back there, that's an initiation that some part of you recognized so early in life. Then they didn't hurt you. It's like when I got a different story, different time, that I got
Mhm.
covered in bees before I
Mhm.
ever started keeping bees. I accidentally got covered head to toe in honeybees. And those moments, like the only answer to this is yes,
Mm.
because otherwise there's fear.
Mhm.
Otherwise there's panic. Otherwise, so I didn't panic. I just went into a euphoric state, having honeybees crawl all over me in a tank top and skirt. Yeah, so that was interesting.
Can I tell you one other thing about that?
Yeah.
Like, the interesting the frame of, yeah, they didn't hurt me, and when I think of snakes, and after that, I really resonated with snakes, and I was shedding a particular skin.
Yeah.
I had had, quite a traumatic experience that I had been integrating, and this follow-up vision quest was a result of how undone I was from the previous trip, and it was my school's response to going like, "Wait, we actually recognize we need more integration for these kids." Like, we did a sweat lodge with this kid, and she came undone, like,
Yeah.
being that honest about what was going on and
Yeah.
that I hadn't spoken created too much vulnerability for me,
Yeah.
too much rawness, and then this was a useful follow-up, and what did happen with that next follow-up after the vision quest, we had another sweat lodge, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw myself born again, like this shed the skin of a certain layer of trauma, obviously not all, but
Yes.
there was a I could see my face. I could see my baby picture in my face. I could see a level of innocence, so I felt like I had shed something,
Wow.
and so that's how it resonates for me in relation to snakes.
That's incredible. And can I just say, and that again, this could be an entire different podcast topic, but
Yeah.
the fact that your school recognized the integration was needed,
Mhm.
if I could like wave a flag for the need for integration post spiritual experiences, I would, because how many of us sign up for a workshop, have a profound experience, and have zero ability to integrate it?
Exactly.
So, hallelujah for that. Wow. And yes, like I just wonder how many listeners are out there going, I know that feeling, or I've had that moment in the mirror. I've had that moment in the mirror. And I do think it's, we all know, we don't all know, but let's say in the field of trauma, we know that PTSD is a spectrum
Mhm.
and that everyone experiences various degrees of trauma in their life. But, there are pretty significant ones that can alter the course of our life. Sometimes it takes moments like what you're describing to, like, there's nothing else will do it. All the other things help. The therapy and the integration are really important. But then there's these profound moments where
Mhm.
the healing takes place. So when I was a young girl, I was about 4 years old, and I had a fairly confronting rattlesnake experience. with a rattlesnake that had made its way into, at this point, I didn't know this, but into the woodpile. We lived out in the country. And my dad and his friend killed it. But, now that I think about it, like my dad was a pretty peaceful guy. I didn't know that he hadn't killed it. It was actually his neighbor's friend because my dad was not quite that type. And they didn't know enough about rattlesnakes. So they this is so graphic, but they cut it in half and put it in a jar. And snakes, if you don't cut off their head, they actually take 3 or 4 hours to actually die. So they're in a tremendous amount of pain.
Yeah.
And I had been a snake kid. I looked for them everywhere. I loved to pick the little red racers up and like find these little snakes in the garden and stuff like that. I didn't know about rattlesnakes. And I had never seen a snake that big. So I was put, like I stood there facing this jar, this giant gallon jar with a snake in it. And the snake was striking the glass, and I was being told that it was dead. And you can imagine what that must have been like for a child who was in love with the earth, loved snakes, and was now told that this thing is dead, it's been killed, it's still striking the glass. And so I developed nightmares. They were very traumatic nightmares. And it took me until about my mid-20s after my first, we could say, Kundalini awakening, when I became sexually active in my, oh gosh, it must have been, I was a late bloomer. It must have been around age 18. And then I started having like the nightmares really increased once that happened, once I became sexually active. And so it was around my mid-20s that I realized and had the memory that at around the same age I was molested. And so what happened is that my child brain couldn't handle that information and put all of it into the snake. Everything, it became a lifelong phobia. It became nightmares. And I sought to heal the nightmares. And in seeking to heal I did therapy, I did all these things, nothing worked, couldn't figure it out. So then I went down the road of like, who is the snake spiritually? And I found, of course, the goddess. I found ancient traditions. I found the snake as a symbol of reclamation and renewal and empowerment and the divine. And of course, the rise of Kundalini energy, which you see in many different cultures, this rise of serpentine energy. And it just totally rewrote my relationship to Eros. It was the snakes that brought me into my spiritual work, snakes and dreams, nightmares in particular. And I think that's really common for people who go through trauma.
Yeah.
To like find their spiritual path through facing the shadow.
I'm having I'm moved by that story, and I'm just gonna take a breath.
It's a big one.
And how beautiful that you kept turning towards yourself, and you kept turning towards like this symbol, this animal, this being. First of all, the image of the dissonance of seeing a snake throwing its body against the glass, and someone telling you it's like you're being gaslit, like it's dead. It's dead. And you're like, no, I'm seeing something and I'm feeling something, and it's not coinciding. It's not congruent with your words. And the intensity of that for a kid,
Yeah.
and then, you're talking about Kundalini awakening. I'm sitting here, I'm having feelings but also I'm feeling awe for how brilliant we are as beings, like how creative we are as beings, that each of our lives we are mythic beings, and that there's these ancient resources that you're able to draw from. And that there's this love for this being that you wanted to heal, and you wanted to heal your nightmares, but also your relationship to snakes. And then how profound, I mean, the snake is a very profound image and symbol in all of the unconscious,
Oh, yeah.
And then related to Kundalini, I don't know if I mentioned this to you offline, but I just finished a 4-month Kundalini yoga teacher training.
Oh, no way.
One of the things that we do is we have this particular chant, and we do it for 2.5 hours straight.
Wow.
And so what I'm experiencing currently, what my body is working through, is that vibration, that chant, I feel like it knocked loose subconscious preverbal trauma. That's mine, but also my ancestors. So
Mhm.
I've,
Mhm.
this idea that, like, that we heal through a spiral, and we keep, we heal, we get closer and closer to kind of like the core, closer and closer to the spine, where this
Mhm.
deep contraction lives, like an imploding star during,
Mhm.
during a shock trauma. And then, and if it happens, if there's enough layers, I think of it as like the sediment that settles in a rusty pipe, right? And then something happens and it shakes the sediment loose, it can cause a blockage in the pipe,
Oh, yes, right.
right? And
Beautiful
so
analogy.
so what I experienced, it's, after during this training over this last month and doing this chanting, is this stuff being shaken loose, and this level of intense contraction that's living in my chest and throat that's still wanting to come up and out. And so thinking of that kundalini, thinking of that snake, and it's like there's such deep wisdom
Yeah.
in our somatic experience. And you spoke about it so beautifully, like that being with the bees is such an embodied presence. Like it asks embodied presence in this exquisite way, that what are the things that have you be that present without thought, And I have a couple things I can share, but that just sounds remarkable, because you're in this exquisite space of love versus fear. And like the line is so delicate, you could just switch into it and panic.
Uh-huh.
But if you keep choosing fear and presence versus getting into a fear of what might happen in the future, right? Like that's just so
Yeah, that's exactly it.
so profound.
I still think it's ironic and, like, makes perfect sense that I would turn towards a venomous creature as my life's work after that experience,
Both, I mean, the snake story, venomous creature, like, I mean,
the
just
bees,
so
that's what I'm saying.
profound. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And yet they are, the honey and the sting. It's such a profound, profoundly rich metaphor, but also lived experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm loving this conversation with you, and I can already tell it's going to need to be a two-part. Be sure to tune back in 2 weeks if you want to experience an extra special exercise led by Ariella in working with senses, somatics, and your dream. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, like, rate, and review it, and share it with your friends. And if you want to stay connected, you can find me at Laid Open Podcast on Instagram, LAIDOPEN PODCAST, or on Facebook under Laid Open Podcast. You can also check out more about my work at passionatelife.org, and charnacassell.com is where you can find my course, my workbook, as well as listen to episodes and read my blog. So I look forward to next time, and thank you so much for tuning in.